Imagine believing in Jesus without ever owning a New Testament. No leather Bible rests beside you. No app opens to Matthew. No table of contents tells you which 27 books belong to Christian scripture. You meet in a crowded room after sunset, oil lamps breathing smoke into the rafters, while someone repeats words attributed to Jesus from memory. If there was no Christian Bible, what exactly did the first Christians believe? And how could a movement cross cities, languages, and generations before it possessed the book that now seems inseparable from it? The modern picture is almost impossible to avoid. Christianity means the Bible, and the Bible means two testaments bound between two covers. But step into the middle of the first century, and that object disappears. The writings later called the New Testament had not yet been gathered, some had not yet been written, others existed as individual letters in distant communities. The first followers of Jesus did not begin with a completed Christian library. They began with an event they believed had changed history, and with people who said they had seen it. This does not mean they had no scripture. Jesus and his earliest followers emerged from the world of Second Temple Judaism, a diverse religious landscape shaped by Torah, prophets, psalms, temple, synagogue, interpretation, and ancestral practice. In Greek-speaking communities, many encountered Israel's writings through Greek translations commonly grouped under the name Septuagint. The boundaries and ordering of sacred collections were not identical everywhere, but these Jewish scriptures supplied the language through which Christians understood creation, covenant, Messiah, suffering, resurrection, and hope. When early Christians proclaimed Jesus, they did not speak into an empty room, they argued from Israel's story. Paul's surviving letters repeatedly introduce scriptural passages with formulas such as, "It is written." The Gospels portray Jesus reading, debating, and interpreting scripture. Yet quotation did not always match one later standardized wording. Authors might use a Greek form, translate or paraphrase, combine passages, or cite from memory. The ancient scriptural world was textual, but it was not a world of identical mass-produced editions waiting in every home. A manuscript was an object made by human hands. Papyrus had to be prepared, ink mixed, sheets arranged, and every line copied. Exact prices are difficult to reconstruct and varied by material, length, labor, and location, so confident modern price tags are misleading. What we can say is simpler. Substantial books required resources and skilled work. Most believers did not maintain private libraries. A community might possess a text that many people knew only because they heard it read aloud. How many people could read? Ancient literacy cannot be reduced to one reliable empire-wide percentage. It varied by region, language, occupation, gender, status, and the kind of reading required. Someone might recognize names, keep accounts, read a letter slowly, or perform literature fluently. Very different skills hidden inside one word. Scholarly estimates remain debated, but broad literacy was limited. Christianity therefore spread through a mixed culture in which writing mattered enormously, even when most encounters with writing happened through another person's voice. Now picture a house church in Corinth, Antioch, or Philippi. These are not purpose-built basilicas. Believers gather in domestic spaces, workshops, courtyards, and rooms made available by patrons. A traveler arrives with news. A teacher explains Israel's scriptures. Prayers are offered. A hymn is sung. A meal may be shared. Then a letter is opened and performed before the group. The listener does not turn pages. The listener watches the reader's face, hears emphasis and cadence, and remembers the words with everyone else. Information moved along Roman roads and sea routes, but not at digital speed and not without danger. Merchants, soldiers, enslaved people, artisans, pilgrims, officials, and missionaries connected the empire. Letters usually traveled with trusted carriers rather than through a universal public mail system available like modern post. Those carriers could explain circumstances, identify the sender, and answer questions. Christianity moved as a network of bodies, walking, sailing, lodging, speaking, carrying fragile words from one room to another. Before a gospel was read, a gospel was announced. Paul's letters, our earliest surviving Christian writings, preserve traditions he says he had received and handed on. In 1 Corinthians 15, he recites a compact sequence about Christ's death, burial, resurrection, and appearances. Many scholars regard its underlying formulation as earlier than the letter itself, though they debate its exact age and wording. Philippians 2 may preserve or adapt an early hymn. These passages reveal belief taking memorable forms before there was a four-gospel collection. But memory is not a recording device. Ancient people trained memory more deliberately than many of us do, and repeated teaching in communities could stabilize important material. At the same time, oral tradition lives through performance. It can be condensed, expanded, translated, arranged, and applied. Scholars disagree over how tightly the sayings and stories of Jesus were controlled before and alongside written Gospels. The honest historical answer is not that memory was perfect or worthless. It was disciplined, social, flexible, and central. So what anchored belief? Apostles and other recognized witnesses carried unusual authority because communities associated them with Jesus or the earliest proclamation. Local leaders taught, prophets spoke, traveling missionaries arrived with recommendations, or without them. The Didache, probably assembled in the late 1st or early 2nd century, warns communities to test itinerant apostles and prophets. That warning is revealing. A living voice could carry sacred weight, but charisma also created risk. Before a closed canon, discernment was not optional. It was survival. Here the story becomes more unsettling. If your congregation had no complete New Testament, how did you know whether a teacher was trustworthy? You compared the message with what you had received. You listened for continuity with Israel's scriptures, with the remembered teaching of Jesus, with apostolic proclamation, and with the worshiping life of neighboring churches. Authority was distributed across texts, people, practices, and communal memory. That system could preserve belief, but it could also generate arguments over whose memory, whose letter, and whose interpretation deserved trust. Paul's letters entered this world as interventions, not chapters in a future Bible. He wrote to particular communities about particular crises: division in Corinth, confusion in Galatia, relationships in Philemon's household, encouragement in Thessalonica. Romans is unusually expansive, yet it too addresses real people in a real city. Paul sometimes dictated through a secretary, and Romans names Tertius as the writer who penned the letter. The physical document was then entrusted to people whose journeys became part of the message's survival. Phoebe is commended to the Roman believers and is widely understood by scholars as a likely carrier of Romans, though the text does not narrate the delivery scene. Tychicus is named in connection with letters and news in Ephesians and Colossians. Such envoys were not silent envelopes. In ancient letter culture, a trusted representative could deliver, perform, clarify, and embody the sender's intentions. When Paul's voice was hundreds of miles away, the carrier stood at the intersection of text and presence. A letter sent to one church could be copied and shared. Colossians instructs its audience to exchange letters with the church in Laodicea. By the late 1st or early 2nd century, 2 Peter refers to a collection of Paul's letters, although the date and authorship of 2 Peter are themselves disputed. Collections formed gradually. One church might know several Pauline letters, another might preserve a gospel and local correspondence, another might hear texts only when a visitor brought them. There was no synchronized download across the empire, and the dates matter. Most scholars place Paul's undisputed letters in the 50s, with 1 Thessalonians often among the earliest, though precise years vary. Mark is commonly dated around the late 60s or 70s. Matthew and Luke are often placed roughly in the 70s through 90s. John is frequently dated near the end of the 1st century, sometimes with proposals extending earlier or later. These are scholarly ranges built from internal and external evidence, not timestamps preserved on original manuscripts. The remaining writings are even harder to compress. Some scholars date Hebrews before 70. Many allow a broader late 1st century range. James, 1 Peter, Jude, and the Johannine letters receive varied proposals. 2 Peter is often placed late and is among the New Testament's most disputed works regarding authorship and date. Revelation is commonly associated with the reign of Domitian in the 90s, though an earlier date is defended by some. Acts is frequently dated around 80 to 90, with wider proposals on both sides. This means the first generation did not wait for books before becoming Christian. Communities were baptized, prayed, argued, suffered, appointed leaders, shared meals, interpreted scripture, and confessed Jesus as Lord while the future New Testament was still emerging. The written Gospels did not create every tradition they contained from nothing. They gathered, shaped, and narrated traditions already circulating, while also becoming powerful new authorities in their own right. The movement lived before the library was complete, and helped produce the library through living. What did Christians actually read? Jewish scriptures remained foundational. Paul's letters circulated. Individual gospels gained authority. 1 Clement, sent from the church at Rome to Corinth around the end of the 1st century, was later read publicly in some churches. The Shepherd of Hermas was treasured by many but did not enter the final New Testament. The Didache transmitted moral instruction, ritual practice, and church order. Boundaries were real, but they were still being negotiated. Useful, ancient, orthodox, apostolic, and scriptural were overlapping categories, not always identical ones. By the middle of the 2nd century, Justin Martyr describes Christian gatherings in which the memoirs of the apostles or writings of the prophets were read for as long as time allowed. He does not hand us a modern table of contents, but his account shows gospel-like writings functioning beside prophetic scripture in worship. Around the same period, competing teachers and movements also produced interpretations and collections. Marcion's sharply restricted set of authoritative writings forced questions Christians had already been confronting. Which books, and why these? Then came a quiet technological revolution, the codex. Instead of a long roll, sheets were folded and joined along one edge, the ancestor of the modern book. Christians did not invent the codex, and early adoption should not be explained by one simple cause. Yet surviving evidence shows a striking Christian preference for codices, especially for texts treated as scripture. A codex allowed writing on both sides, easier movement between passages, and the gathering of multiple works. Its covers could turn scattered voices into a visible collection. But do not imagine one enormous Bible appearing immediately. Early codices could contain a single work or a small cluster, 4 Gospels, Pauline letters, or mixed texts. Copying still required papyrus or parchment, scribes, exemplars, time, and money. Every copy introduced the possibility of spelling differences, accidental omissions, harmonization, clarification, or deliberate correction. Textual criticism exists because manuscripts differ. Yet the abundance and distribution of surviving copies also allow scholars to compare witnesses and reconstruct the history of the text with unusual depth. The book did more than preserve teaching. It changed how communities could arrange authority. Separate Gospels placed together invited comparison. Paul's letters in a sequence began to look like a corpus rather than a trail of emergencies. Public reading made distant authors present. Marginal marks, corrections, abbreviations of sacred names, and reading aids reveal scribes and readers actively using these objects. Christianity was never merely oral and then suddenly written. Speech and text fed each other, each giving the other reach. By the late 2nd century, the outline of a New Testament had become recognizable in many places, but its edges remained uneven. Irenaeus defended 4, and only 4, Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The Muratorian Fragment, usually dated by many scholars to the late 2nd century but assigned later by some, lists most books that would enter the New Testament while omitting or questioning others. This was not universal agreement. It was evidence of communities sorting inherited texts by apostolic connection, usage, coherence, and perceived truth. Origen in the 3rd century distinguished books acknowledged by all from those disputed in some churches. In the early 4th century, Eusebius offered categories that included recognized, disputed, and rejected writings. Hebrews faced doubts in parts of the West. Revelation was revered in some regions and resisted in others. James, Jude, 2 Peter, and 2nd and 3rd John could stand near the boundary. The disagreement was not proof that nothing mattered. It shows that Christians cared enough about authority to argue over evidence, origin, and reception. In 367, Athanasius of Alexandria named the same 27 New Testament books familiar to most Christians today, the first surviving list to match that collection exactly. His festal letter was influential, not a magical moment when every church instantly obeyed. Regional councils at Hippo and Carthage later affirmed comparable lists in North Africa, but they did not convene as a single worldwide authority creating scripture from nothing. Recognition continued through ecclesial use, copying, teaching, and regional decision, with some differences lingering across Christian traditions. Now we can dismantle 4 myths without mocking anyone's faith. The Bible did not fall from heaven as a finished object. The first Christians did not carry pocket Bibles. Everyone did not agree immediately, and the canon was not invented overnight by one emperor, bishop, or council. Historical development does not automatically disprove divine guidance. That conclusion belongs to theology. History can only show the human process we can trace: preservation, performance, dispute, selection, copying, and reception across centuries. Nor should we reverse the myth and imagine chaos. Long before the final edges settled, many communities shared a strong center: Israel's scriptures, reverence for Jesus, apostolic proclamation, baptism, prayer, communal meals, moral teaching, and increasingly the four Gospels and Pauline letters. Diversity was significant, but diversity is not the same as infinite possibility. Some writings traveled widely, others remained local. Some were read for instruction but not treated as apostolic scripture. Consensus accumulated at different speeds around different books. So what did the first Christians believe? They believed before they possessed a bound New Testament that Israel's God had acted through Jesus. They proclaimed his death and resurrection, called him Messiah and Lord, expected God's purposes to be fulfilled, practiced baptism and communal worship, and tried to order life around his teaching. But these statements did not carry identical meanings in every group. Christology, law, Gentile inclusion, leadership, ritual, and the future generated fierce disagreements visible inside the New Testament itself. The deeper question is philosophical. Where does authority live when no single object contains it? For the earliest Christians, it lived in a constellation. Scripture heard aloud, witnesses remembered, teachers tested, letters exchanged, rituals repeated, and communities correcting one another. Later, the Canon did not erase those forces. It gave them a more stable textual center. Even then, a book could not interpret itself. Readers, languages, institutions, and traditions continued to stand between ink and understanding, just as they do now. Perhaps that is why this history feels dangerous. Modern people often want origins to be clean: one message, one book, one unanimous beginning. The evidence offers something more human: fragile papyrus, exhausted travelers, rooms crowded with listeners, memories repeated across languages, communities preserving letters not written for us, yet ultimately reaching us. The New Testament emerged not outside history, but through it. Whether one sees providence in that process is a matter of faith. The process itself is remarkable enough to face honestly. Christianity survived its first decades without the New Testament as a bound collection. More than survived, it crossed ethnic boundaries, entered major cities, generated worship, endured persecution and internal conflict, and built networks capable of preserving its contested memory. Does that weaken the story or make it stranger? A faith now identified with a book first traveled in human voices. And perhaps the most extraordinary fact is not that Christians eventually formed a New Testament, but that long before they held it together, its future words were already holding scattered communities together. Subscribe to Unmasking the Gods and continue exploring history's greatest mysteries with us.